That's an old podcast. I'm now talking about recruitment. Right, cheers.
Yeah. Top 3 podcast, that one.
Yeah, well, it wasn't. It was fourth. It was fourth.
Oh, the next day it was a number 3.
Oh, can we start this podcast clip? Just put a clip on Matt's podcast, top 3.
Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to really think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. This week, I'm joined by Matt Swain.
Oh, hi everyone. Hello.
Together, we're going to explore staffing. But first, Matt, what you reading for?
Hey, what you reading for?
Yeah, good question. I think I read quite often at the moment, generally sort of papers and blogs, I suppose, depending on what we're trying to write at the hub and design. But I think what's kind of fascinating at the moment, I suppose, I've gone a bit backwards and returned to Bjork and like desirable all difficulties. Maybe it's an instinct or a knee-jerk reaction to the prevalence of like quizzing, right? Like, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, right? I think that, we've got retrieval quizzes left, right, and centre, and But I remember reading, when I first read this, some of their papers on it and some of their articles on it, I remember thinking there's more to it than this, right? There's more to kind of like increasing the quality of our memories, of our knowledge than simply just remembering the thing you learned in the essence in the way in which you learned it, really. So I kind of returned to that, and I kind of read it again and read some of their articles again, and just a bit more convinced about that we need to think a bit more about what retrieval looks like. And I imagine there's plenty of people who've already said this, but I don't get to read every book out there. I just tend to just read articles, have a think, and talk to my colleagues, and just time to sort of, at least within STEP and then within the schools I work in, just sort of reframing what we understand by retrieval, or I guess really desirable, difficult. Like what's important and what's essential to create like useful, like knowledge, like not just knowledge but useful knowledge. And when you sort of go back to Bjork, and I might have misunderstood this, but when you go back to it, like what it comes down to is it's about increasing both the retrieval and the storage strength of that bit of information, right? Retrieving it alone will increase its retrieval strength. Like if I keep being asked, the capital of Hungary, eventually I'll know the capital of Hungary, right? But that in and of itself isn't massively useful beyond answering a pub quiz question. And what there are other things I need to do with that knowledge as I retrieve it to make sure that it becomes useful, right? And to allow me to become more expert, to develop my schema. And I guess what I'm thinking, what I'm coming back to is kind of those concepts of like interleaving, which I'm always really excited about, and then what that looks like in a classroom, what that looks like in a school. It looks like a SATs quiz, really, doesn't it? SATs test, to be honest. Like, and then also this idea of, I guess, of variation in context, like varying the application of knowledge. And I think that's something I've always understood from mathematics. I imagine like yourself, like, let's imagine we're teaching, I always give examples of maths. So if I taught, for example, something like, so it's column multiplication, right? 2 digit time, 1 digit multiplication. And over time, they practice and they're good at it and they can perform it. Then over time, they were asked to answer question after question, retrieval quizzes on how to do that. Really useful, but that would be its only utility, right? But it's got far greater utility than that, hasn't it? And but if I then ask the pupil to answer the question, I want to buy 17 tins of cat food for my cat at £5 a tin or something, then would they be able to transfer that across, right? So they've got this algorithm. Is there like an easy transfer? And I don't think that's the case, is it? Right? I don't think that's not. You have to kind of like, you develop the ability to transfer the more interconnected your knowledge is. And so I guess I've been thinking a lot about the importance of variation in context, right? And that to a degree, you can't just throw it in and not teach it. And so I've been thinking, particularly through a maths lens, but also other subjects, chatting to my colleagues about, so what does that look like then? How do you achieve that? How do you, because if they haven't made that transfer before, and those early stages when you've taught them this algorithm, and then you want them to apply to that problem or an area problem or something, then in the first instance, you need to hold the hand and show that they can apply it somewhere else. And over time, I guess you do less than that. You just throw the problems at them. They start to, I guess, make that transfer themselves. So I'm kind of a bit fascinated by that, really, I guess, is where I am. And kind of off in sort of tune with that, like, is kind of like, I've been looking, it seems to sort of sit really well with like FRAP first, sort of like really nice model on like expertise. She does a really nice sort of simplified graphic and an explanation of sort of expertise. And it's that idea of like increased expertise and mastery coming from not just like the repetition of a single pathway, but repeated pathways to other pieces of knowledge. And so from all of this comes me kind of with my colleagues, like chatting about and maybe challenging like what our current setup is for like making pupils more expert with things we've taught, and then how can you make that different, and what PD sits behind doing that, because it's not as simple as going right, start creating opportunities for transfer and variation in context without really explaining what that could look like. And so that's kind of where I am. It does vary quite a lot what I was thinking about, but that's something I've been thinking about lately. And interestingly, I was delivering the Ambition Mentor conference the other day for year 2, like, so I work for the hub, and part of that is facilitating all the ECT and mentor training, which has been a really amazing experience this year, actually. And sat within that was kind of FRAP first model, which is interesting. I've just written a bit of PD based on what I was talking about, using that model. Again, looking at how you develop teacher expertise and talking about in year 2 with mentors. I really like this. And I it's one of those moments you think, wow, we're thinking the same thing. This is cool. I'm thinking the same as whichever brainiac ambition might thought of this. That in year 2 with mentors and ACTs, there's a need to take that thing you practiced in the first year with them, like that classroom routine, and bring in variation. Like in year 2, okay, now you're gonna practice it again, but you're gonna throw in some variables. But what if this happens? But what if this happens? But what if this happens? And I guess, like, that was kind of a pleasing moment, and I guess it made me think, like, I'm on something here, maybe, or we, the group I work with and the schools I work with, maybe we're probably right to challenge at least what we do. I reckon there's probably people who've cottoned onto this years ago, right? But you live in an echo chamber, especially in a big old trust. And although I spend a lot of time talking to you guys and chatting on Twitter, we're a bit more listening these days, so I'm so busy. But that's where I am. So Bjork and Bjork, it's old school, but I think it's worth revisiting, because I think it's maybe not as simple as we may have made it in our curriculums. Like it's just a quiz, it's just a pub quiz, and is that really developing the sort of knowledge we want our pupils to develop?
So I'm going to recommend something that I mentioned before, Ollie Lovell's book, Tools for Teachers, but in particular the chapter on instruction. It's so clear and pound for pound value in terms of how he articulates his approach, the approach that he sort of learned from other people, and how he sort of demonstrates that. I think he's got some pretty useful flow diagrams. I think hopefully that's the right word, but yeah, in particular, I think people should definitely read the book in general, but in particular that chapter is operating.
I'll pick it up, because I think I read his. I buy a lot of books. A lot of them don't get read because I just don't have time. I'm a bit of a sort of article man. We'll read the abstract, that's a bit of research. But like I think I read his. Was it one of those? Was it the Inaction series? Maybe did one CLT.
Yeah.
And it was really good. I thought it was a great little read. It sort of hit all the right notes. In fact, it's super useful, actually. I think it carries some really strong exemplification. He's a good writer, actually, isn't he? He does that great thing that, like, I guess all good educational thinkers kind of like do, is that they take something complex and make it simple and digestible. Well, I guess just something that all good teachers do, is take complex things and make them simple, right? And I definitely look to pick that up, because I thought he's that one on the Contilofi one was great. That was really good, really clear, really succinct, and it sort of hit so many beats. So I thought it was super useful for me and my colleagues. I think we definitely delved into it when we were writing PD around those areas, So yeah, good stuff. That sounds good. I'll pick that up.
So the focus of this episode is staffing, my first question, Matt, maybe a little less formal than the interviews we've done in the past, is staffing a big deal?
Yes, that's a great leading question there. So just to frame me being here and talking about staffing, that's probably useful for the listener. So and like who I am and I guess also who I've spoken to before I did this interview, right? So if you haven't listened to, I've been on the pod a couple of times, so it seems like a founding father, like a silent partner, really. It's in the background. you like do it every week, but yeah. And so I'm currently deputy director, of the Step Ahead Teaching Hub. So we're one of those big hubs that trains all the teachers now, kind of like, and we're a bit like some sort of medieval sort of, it's a kingdom like set up in the south of England. We've got a huge reach, but interesting, I'm leaving this role now. So I've been there for this year when we became the hub, and I've helped roll out the new CT program, the MPQs, and run the AB. But next year I'm moving, back towards like schools, because that's kind of where my heart is really. But I've also worked in Step Trust for quite a long time, and with lots of leaders, improving a lot of schools, and before that I was deputy head, and I've worked in a senior in a couple of other schools. But I'm involved in recruitment loads. So I'm very, very fortunate, really fortunate to work in a really good trust, right? And also a trust that recruits and retains the very best staff. That we've got a really, really high retention rate, and we're it's a really good trust. Like, there's a lot of smart people in my trust, and we do some decent stuff in schools. You've had Charlotte on, you've had Tom Gary on, you've had a few of our guys. Neil Alman's on, with us now. But we've got, we've got a really good track record of recruiting great people, or making them even better, like, I guess, to CPD and everything else, and not losing them. And if you're a trust, or part of a trust, that allows you to grow. That's really important, because when you grow as a trust, often you'll work with schools that are maybe like lacking capacity. If the school's in trouble, people often, quite rightly, because that's a really tough place to be, people often just will go somewhere else, and so the school can often be lacking capacity. And so you have to bring that with you. And so you can only do that if you've got it, right? So I'm really fortunate. And so I've been part of like lots and lots of interviews over the years. I work across 8 schools currently in Sussex, but I work with some amazing leaders, like some really amazing heads. Special shout out to like Jeremy Meek and Dee Hughes, and Zoe, the 3 heads I've spoken to ahead of this interview, just to make sure I sort of dot my I's and cross my T's. Like, I've been, and those guys are all great. Zoe Griffiths, those guys are all absolutely brilliant at recruiting and retaining staff, and getting the very best of staff. And between them, we've got quite a silly amount of outstandings for leadership. I mean, and 3 or 4 we've got under the new Ofsted, so we haven't not had outstanding for leadership for a long time. Along with outstanding other categories, but I think that's the one that's important in this discussion. So that's what I'm here. That I've experienced of it. I was part of those leadership teams, but I'm also fortunate enough to have the time to work with great leaders, and also have had their input prior to these interviews. I was like, do I know enough? Like, this be useful? I know quite a lot, but those guys know more. So they've all given me a bit of time ahead of this today. And so, going back to your question, it's massive, isn't it? Right. So schools, live or die by the staff in them, don't they? Okay, so that your success as a school, your success in educating peoples and improving outcomes is completely dependent on the people in your building. Okay, completely dependent on having like the right people on the bus, in the right seats on the bus. That's it's essential. And so whether and so if you're a head teacher, like, your career depends on it, doesn't it? Right, if you want to look at it that way. If you think about like the finances of a school, well over 2/3, quite a lot over 2/3 of most school budget goes on staffing. It's easily the single biggest outlay for the school. It's your biggest investment in teaching and learning, your biggest investing curriculum. It's your biggest use of pupil money, and because it's the thing that improves quality of education, it's the thing that improves behavior, it's the thing that improves personal, social, and emotional, and it's the thing that improves leadership. Right? It's the thing that's going to make your school great or good. And so, like, it's massive. But I've been in schools where it's been a real problem and really challenging, and whether it's been hard to recruit or it's been hard to retain for something that's so important, that's really difficult, isn't it? And I think coming into this, I felt reasonably qualified to talk on this because where we're working currently, like the south of England, South Coast, it's quite a challenging place to recruit just by definition. So, I worked in London as a head. We have lots of schools in London, but there's just the sheer geography of it, isn't it? So we've got our backs to this. We've got our backs to the sea, haven't we? So you're automatically like recruiting from half the size of the pool everybody else is recruiting from. The density of the population is far sort of like loose around here. So it's a hard job to recruit. Yet, I've seen the best recruitment and retention I've ever seen down here. And I've worked in Southwark and Wandsworth and Surrey and in lots of other areas where, the sort of the metrics would suggest it should be a little easier, right? But that's where I found the difficulty. So yeah, it's huge. I think staffing your school and staffing it well and developing those staff and retaining those staff is essential, isn't it? Not just for like short-term school improvement, but for long-term school improvement and for the outcomes of the pupils you serve. So I think it's a really good thing to talk about. So yeah, so yes, really important. I'll sort of explain kind of why in a minute.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. My role exists because my head teachers decided they wanted to invest in their teachers, and they thought that the best way to support our pupils in sort of raising their ambitions and their outcomes was through having more proficient staff. So I'm 100%. I think it is a big deal, and like you say, making sure you keep them, the good ones, is particularly important.
And I'm just being mindful on this one. I know that at the moment I'm speaking from the place of working, running about to my own teaching and learning team of like 12 people, to do something sort of much bigger in a trust that you can't achieve in a one form school. I was a deputy head in a one form school. I was out of class a day and a half a week, right? That's the reality of one form schools in the sticks. So what I'm trying to bring today to this conversation isn't like how big Matt's do it. We've got our own PGC. We just literally train our own teachers. Yeah. We solve the ITE problem by just training them ourselves, for us anyway. But what I'm trying, hopefully all the stuff we talk about today is kind of relevant to everybody. And I have got that perspective. I have worked in those small schools as well, and in cities and in urban areas. So hopefully kind of everything I share that I've taken from my experiences and experiences of very successful others I work with, it is useful kind of to everybody, right? Like it's not like because I'm in a supermarket. And of course we can recruit, we pay loads of money, and we don't actually don't pay enough money, but yeah, hopefully it's all kind of relevant.
Yeah, I think it will be. So we've established, okay, we think it's important, we're pretty sure it's important. How can we make sure we get staffing right?
Right, so there's a big answer to this one, I think, right? There's quite a big answer to this one, so I got a lot of input on this one, and it begins with the leaders really understanding what they have in their school, what the strengths are in their school, what the weaknesses are in their school, or the areas of development are in the school, pretty better way of putting it. And that takes leaders being like, having conversations with staff, being visible, walking the school, paying attention to the curriculum. All those things are super important, aren't they? Now, it's not a leader's job to write the curriculum for school, like a head teacher. They're not going to have the time for anyone that's been in senior leadership knows there isn't time to do all that. You find people, you find more expert people that and create them the time, but you do need to be in tune with your school, and I think recruitment starts going wrong when you don't really know what you're recruiting for, or you don't know what you've also got the capacity to recruit for, because that's another question, isn't it? So like, I've got a sense of my profile. Does that profile mean that I've got the capacity to bring in like a really promising new teacher who's clearly got potential, but they need mentoring? Okay, either as an ECT, or just over time they need mentoring. They need a year or so of PD or an MPQ to get them to where I want them. Or do I not have that? Do I not have that capacity in my school? And what I need to do is buy in. I just need something off the peg experience. I need to pay a bit more, probably, usually is the case, but I need that experience off the peg in my school now. And all those kind of things are really important. I think, when recruitment's done really well, you kind of know exactly what you're looking for. You know exactly the gap you're trying to fill, and the better you understand that, the better every other phase of recruitment is going to go. So from your advert to your shortlisting to the interviews and whatever themselves, and everything beyond that, and all the things that keep them in your school. So I guess it's gonna be a long answer this one. So I think you start with like knowing your school, right? And that's not a given. It's not a given that people really understand the quality of teaching in their classrooms, or that the areas of expertise that the teachers have and where we don't have expertise. And it may be that they don't have expertise. They can find that another way, like through some like yourself. I mean, you're very lucky if you get Kieran Mackle in to your school, but but you get the idea. And so I think you kind of start there. That's the general feedback was like you've got to know your school really well to know what you're trying to, the gaps you're trying to recruit into, and whether you have a capacity to do that. And interestingly, on a side note, we spent this year as the appropriate body for East Sussex, Brighton and Hove, right? Basically, what you do, that's the assessment arm, like the moderation arm of induction. And actually, it's been really interesting this year to find there are a few ECTs. Some schools have really struggled with taking ECT because they haven't questioned and checked if they have that capacity. Can they get those mentors out? There's a real ask now for getting ECT out. It's an investment of an hour. You've got to find an hour a week, release that mentor in year one, and half that in year two. And actually, some schools haven't done that. Haven't had maybe spent the time they should have, right? Doing that due diligence or making sure their staffing structure currently can cope with an ECT. And I think you can figure people this year a little because it was new. But I think what that has led to is some really unhappy ECTs. Not many. We've been really fortunate across the whole of East Sussex and Brighton Hove, but there's been definitely a few examples this year across the year where it's been more challenging in schools because actually they didn't quite have capacity to do what's required. And so I think that's really important, because if that goes wrong, if you take somebody on that's promising but you can't give the support they need, then they're likely to go a year later, aren't they? Or find somewhere else. So I guess it kind of starts with that. And I think the best advice I've heard is from Jeremy Meek, who is executive head of quite a lot of schools down here and an incredibly successful head. I think Lloyd's met him. Lloyd's spent a lot of time talking to him, and he's just a ridiculously good executive head, right? And he said really early on when I came to work with him in STEP, you recruit like your career depends on it. And I didn't really know what that meant, right? I was like, okay, well, that just seems to be a smart thing to say, but he does. Recruitment is the priority. Like, staffing is so important that you have to go over and above to create time for that process should you need to fill a gap in your school, should you want to develop that school. And my experience with recruitment was sling an advert out about April, May, whenever it was, or sort of June time, see who comes in, and you go with what comes comes into the inbox, right? Maybe it couldn't be further away from what he and I guess the other head teachers around here do. It's a full-on mission, but what they get is like the biggest pool of teachers in the hardest place to get teachers. And I'll talk about some of the things they do in a bit, but I think that's a real takeaway for me. Recruitment, your career does kind of depend on it, right? And treat it as being as important as it is. And that's about prioritizing. And as a head, or as a deputy head, or a leader in a school, your whole life is prioritizing. But it's being sure that when that time comes around, that you really do put the time into doing it really well. Is that kind of making sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. And I think, knowing how successful you guys have been, like you said, I've spoken to quite a few people who have started as teachers within your academy trust and then sort of risen, over time. You can see that investment, because you are so many years down the line. We're fortunate we can say, well, this is where teachers end up if they're, if you pay attention when you're recruiting.
It's a big old process, and it's understanding that process. So I guess you start with, so what gaps you've got, okay, and then it's kind of like about so the next thing is like your advert, isn't it? So you've got to get the advert right, okay, and that in itself isn't just most people just churn out the same old stuff every year, but you're recruiting for a particular post, aren't you? Right? Are you looking for a particular skill set possibly? Or you might be looking for something broader, but spend time on that advert. You want to recruit from the biggest pool possible. Yeah. But so many small things can reduce the size of that pool. So, and things we look at, and this is probably a bit anal really, but I think maybe makes a difference. You write the copy out for your job advert, and you be aware that you're selling the school or the organisation as much as you are giving details of the job, so it's getting that balance. But also, we always run any advert through kind of I think some weird sort of gender bias software, because just your own copy alone can carry some like unconscious gender bias, right? The advert themselves, that's a starting point, because the first thing that's going to get their attention. Make sure it's not eliminating people in the first place by not having the detail that you wanted, not bringing the right eyes to advert, or just by the sort of like that unconscious bias in the pronouns or the language used in there, that's just, without you knowing it, pushing 6 or 7 really good candidates away. So you kind of go, so advert, like nail the advert, right? Sitting within this is like, be timely, get in early, be willing to go more than once on advert. We recruit, like, we run three recruitments for like ECTs. We always need ECTs every year because we've got like 8 schools, right? So and so you go early, and then go again if you need to. That sort of, if you think about the cost of recruiting again the following year, or pulling in supply, or being left with just one person, you have to take them and they may be not quite the right candidate and they're very expensive. Like, it's worth spending a little bit of money on recruitment to get the right candidate. And timing is really important there. So like, be ahead of your competitors. Not be so far ahead it's not realistic, but you can start looking for ECTs like, early in the year, much earlier than when they would necessarily, like, you'd normally look for other posts. And when we say timing as well, like when you're going to drop the adverts, create realistic time for you to then engage with the responses. So Jeremy would say, and I think I'd agree with him, you should speak to every single candidate that shows interest before they even get to our application. Speak to them, and tell them, let them, get their buy-in to what you do, your approach and what you offer and what you're about. And whilst learning about them, like you said, you really want to avoid having anyone get in past shortlisting you haven't actually met or spoken to. That's not always perfect, but if you create the time for this process, beyond putting an advert out and having a shortlisting down on a Friday for half a day with the rest of CLT and saying, actually, this process requires this, and this, then you can do those things. And he and the heads that I work with around here and those in London do these things. They create all the time necessary to speak to and to secure like the right people applying for the post. And then we this is pretty anal stuff. This might be quite niche, right? But recruitment is an interesting area. So you make sure your adverts are kind of like that they're solid, and that they're not suggesting you're looking for a particular type of person, or particular gender, whatever it might be, but they're sort of targeted. And then you're sort of timely, and then you're talking to them, and you're making sure that you're always trying to like tell them what you're doing, but also learn about them, showing an interest in them. And then it's kind of like your recruitment panel, get a decent recruitment panel, like get some expertise in that panel. If you're looking for an SEND support TA, you need the right people in that room to be able to sort of like sift through their experience, see what that means. Have a really robust and appropriate panel for shortlisting, not just the head and the deputy, whatever it might be. That doesn't mean, that's hard in a small school, but you can bring it, we'll talk about this later, you can bring in expertise from other schools and other areas to sit on these panels. Nobody minds, and there's a real benefit in doing that. We'll talk about that a little bit later maybe, but having a really strong recruitment panel. One thing we started to look at this year in the trust, actually listening last year, and actually we did some training on this the other day for ECTs, interestingly. We really sort of found interested in like unconscious bias, right? And how that may, and we know it exists, right? So we know unconscious bias is a thing, and if I had time, we talked about various sort of like research around it, and the fact that it's incredibly impactful. And we know that one of the biggest arguments against teacher assessment is that time and time again we've shown as a group of people to have to exhibit unconscious bias on assessments against like gender and SEND and all these sort of like demographics, right? So that's going to be there. If that's there in assessment, it's there in everything, isn't it? And so we've spent a bit of time this last year or so as a trust really trying to unpick what it is and understand what it is, and maybe trying to mitigate a bit harder against it in all areas of trust. Because one thing you want in a trust is, we talk about this like massive, or any school, getting the best pool of candidates, you don't exclude anybody. And you don't exclude anybody due to some unconscious bias you haven't tapped into. So we spent quite a lot of time researching, working with some experts beyond the trust. We know quite conveniently around that area, and kind of educating ourselves a bit. Have you heard about the social graces model? Like it's basically, it's, it looks at all the different things that kind of make you, and then as a result may create unconscious biases within you. And I guess the better you tap into that, like, where the geography you come from, your religion, X, Y, the media you consume, and so on and so forth, then the better chance you have at least of being aware of that when you're looking at, like, sort of interview packs, and where you may just, just where somebody's from, maybe a reason you don't know that you've put them in the wrong pile. Do you know what I mean? Or maybe they've gone from maybe to a no. And so that sounds like sort of like edge of, sort of, I don't know, maybe it sounds a bit unnecessary, but I can't think it is something. I think unconscious bias is a real thing. We know it's a real thing, and it unconsciously must impact every sort of aspect of what we do, including kind of shortlisting. So we spent a bit of time as a trust now, like really sort of engaging with this and thinking about it and starting to educate ourselves around it, I guess. I think that's maybe a bit, I don't know, I think it's really important, but that's something. So I guess at this point you've got, like, okay, so we've got the best pool of people in, and we've got the best panel to look at the candidates, and we're making sure we're selecting them for the very best reasons, right? Well, everyone in there has got, we're getting the best people now to the interview itself. So that's kind of got, I'm still in recruitment basically, but this is where it is, right? This is the process, right? And it's a really serious thing. And I think it comes back to, if you want to be successful as a school, recruit really great people, train them and retain them. And then really once we're in, I'm not going to go into interviews. I think that's, people have got their own opinions on how you do that. And I don't think it's the exact way, but I think it is really important, like, once they are in place, that you've got the conditions to keep them. If you're going to spend all that time and all that energy getting this ideal candidate in the slot you want them to be in, then you need to have the right conditions at school to make sure they don't leave like a year later, right? And those conditions are reasonably obvious, I think. So, but interestingly, talking to some of my colleagues, like the head teachers I spoke to before this interview, there's some really interesting sort of gems to think about here. So obviously, that you need to show, you need to manage behaviour. You need to show them, let them teach. So first of all, you've got to have a grip on behaviour. Now, you may not have a complete grip on it, but you've got to show you own it. You've got to let them, if they're teachers or TAs, do their job. Okay. Now, part of that is to manage behaviour through their expectations and through their routines and through their positive relationships, but it's also yours as a leader, and you've got to, give them the space to do the thing you've employed them to do, right? And then you've got to, like, invest in them. You've got to, and then Jeremy, I was speaking about this, I can't remember now, but spoke on, it's about very early on taking time to help them find their career pathway from almost day one. Right, it's very easy, like in a bigger school particularly, to have blind spots with staff, to spend more time talking to some staff than others, and some staff you barely ever speak to. But you need to take time to have just a short meeting every half term, to check in with them, talk about what they want to do, get and start with them to create that career pathway for them. Whether it's like as a TA and through MVQs and maybe onto a graduate scheme, whether it's with your ECT looking forward to MPQs, whether it's somebody around a master's, whatever it might be, but pay attention. We're no different to, like, kids, are we, right? We want to feel like we have status in the group that we work in, that we matter, that we are of value to our employers. Okay, I think every teacher knows that. We all really care about what people think about how well we're doing our job. I've been in schools where, and I would be very, very much guilty of, there being staff in that school I've never spoken to as a leader, rarely. The best leaders do. The very best leaders, like, they attend to everybody. They spread recognition, and they take time deliberately, like consciously, know that every term they're going to have a 10-minute, 15-minute check-in with each member of staff to see how they're doing, but also to see where they want to go. So that, and then, that person's like valued, aren't they? And actually, they think, oh, this person's going to help me get better. And if I get better, I'll help the school get better. And then we come back to this idea of, like, knowing your staffing profile, and having those conversations really helps with that. This attention is really key. We talk about it in classrooms. It's very easy to, like, lose the grey middle in a classroom. sort of you've got those slow graspers, anyone less than the rapid graspers, and you can not attend to some of the people in the middle. And often, that may be the same in a school, the loud staff, the staff that have, and all those staff that are close to in authority, the ones you talk to, and there's a whole group of staff you don't. And I think a really good tip here would be is to make sure you don't have those blind spots, right? So like behavior, crafting like their career pathway with them, like attend to them, and then be aware of the options out there. The options are great now. Like this is like a golden era of PD for like whether you're whatever stage of career you're at. I mean, like, I'm not trying to sell anyone stuff here, but the MPGs are good. Like those middle leadership ones, some of the middle leadership ones that have gone, the new specialist ones are great. There's no hassle either for school. It's like 1 day conference and a bit of twilight. It's no real cost. There's no reason not to put people on those. Tune into what people are doing and help them like follow that pathway. Like a really nice example of this is in Hawks Farm. I'll give you the first names: Annabelle, Sarah, and Olivia were 3 ECTs that joined us 4 years ago. Annabelle is now like just about to become an assistant head. Olivia is now the training Senko, and Sarah now works for me in TNL. And these are where they should have always worked, but that was a tension from day one as to where they were going. Their training between when they joined to where they are now has been taking them down those pathways, and that's because someone paid attention, really. And that stuff matters, doesn't it? Like, if you're in a school that people care about how it's going and your well-being and stuff. And so, I guess it's like put high quality CPD in if you can do it yourself, and we try and do that. If you can't, there's lots of it out there now, loads of it, right? One of our big successes as a trust is workload. We have thinned that stuff out. Like, me, I'll argue that marketing class has some value in maths, and so they do it, but it's in the lesson, right? But wherever it's not unnecessary, it goes. We're just looking at like a shared PPA model across 8 schools, because I think that's like a really efficient way of planning. We'll see, and it absolutely reduces workload. And so think about those 3 key areas that we know are the 3 reasons people leave the profession, right? And there might feel as limitations, right, in a one formatory school, but there's loads of opportunities now to do stuff beyond your own school, but remain in your school. There's an opportunity to work with other schools, to work with hubs, there's a lot more collaboration within the sector than there's been for a long time, I feel. Maybe that's not your experience, but I definitely feel there's a lot more than there used to be. And you can seek that stuff out, because that is a challenge in one formatory. There's only like, so many places to go in there. But you can, there can be other opportunities you can give people.
I'm sitting listening, Matt, and I could listen to it all night, because what you're saying makes so much sense. Like you say, the 3 big ticket items: behavior, actually paying attention to people and what they want for the future, and workload. If you sort those, you'd be hard pressed to find a reason not to stay in a school. I mean, you weren't kidding when you said it would be a big answer. So I reckon of the 3 that we've got, we're going to choose one, and then we'll come back to this another time.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So
I'll pick one. Yeah.
Then, well, I think I'm really interested to know, the advert, I can totally see where you're coming from, because some adverts I will just not look at because of how the words they use.
Yeah.
How else do we get people in the door, like you say, in a one form entry school?
Yeah. So this is really interesting. So because that's where we are down here. So we're the schools that joined STEP initially down in East Sussex were schools that were, it's certainly beating a drum. It's context, right? They're special measures. They were just, which makes them undesirable places to work for many people, because it's hard, right? It's not because you're like, it's just hard. Why do it? Why stay there? Why join a school that's the measures? That's a tough place to be. Everyone knows that. We've all done it. So it's undesirable from the word go. We're there on the coast, where it's even less desirable, because there's just a smaller pool to pull from, and the money's better in London, And so how do you do it? So and I guess some of the things we talked about earlier, like create time, put your energy into it, put your time into it, make it really important. I asked Jeremy, I said, like, okay, and Zoe and Dee, three of our sort of most senior heads and executive heads, they're like, what other things can you do? And actually, what have you done? And some really good stuff came out of this. So Jeremy said, he said, like, lots of things, just think outside the box. Right? First of all, like, where else are you going to find stuff? So first of all, work with agencies. They may charge the fee that may seem exorbitant at 10%, whatever it is, of their annual salary. But the cost of staff turnover is higher. The cost of recruitment itself is high. You know, it's about balancing the long-term savings over and long-term gains over the kind of like short-term costs. Like, don't be adverse to that. These guys, it's their job. They scour, like, you know, they headhunt, they scour LinkedIn. On a full-time basis, they look for people to fill, you know, fill roles in schools they know exist. Sarah, that I spoke on earlier, who's now like the queen of curriculum in East Sussex, right? A real, one of the bright new faces in STEP, I guess, at the moment, came from an agency. She's from America. Right? She came from an agency that dealt with like teaching in America. She's phenomenal, but she came from an agency. Other sort of really good tips and that aren't very particularly difficult is get yourself, you'll have a local university, like get yourself on the PGE panel, on the shortlist panel. Like these things are perfectly easy to do, perfectly possible to do. And then you're starting to, like, you'll know who's coming in and then who's leaving, don't you? You're then becoming connected to that next wave of like of ECTs. You've got those relationships with the university itself. I know Jeremy and I think Alan and 2 or 3 of the heads down here do just that. Just sit on you get to sit on the panels. We spoke earlier about having like a really robust shortlist panel. So it's really useful for them to have like an executive primary head or a primary head in those, because it brings another perspective. So everyone's winning, but it's also then giving you, like, you get a sense of what's coming through and what's out there, and you've got a relationship with those ECTs and maybe appearing at those, you know, sort of recruitment open days that you may not have otherwise. And Jeremy was saying, like, when you find it really difficult, like there'll be schools near you that don't. So ask to sit on their panels and ask to speak to they'll have candidates to apply that maybe aren't suitable for them. But not good enough, just not suitable, right? So it's about the role being right. But then maybe you've got an in there to speak to them. You know, agencies, panels seem to be a real, you know, people do it well. University would be an obvious one, but really schools that do a good job of it locally will have a really good panel. Get in on those panels, build relationships. You know, that's definitely something that's out there, and you know, that everyone benefits from those sorts of things. And then I think it's about like building like a really sort of like unique like R&R package, so recruitment retention package, right? So, and that's not about golden handshakes and stuff, but just create something that's unique about joining you. Okay, so they join our trust, I think. They get free breakfast, they get a free lunch. Actually, that's something you should sell to people. That's a massive saving, right? They get like a subscription to Perk Box, which is basically like every other one of those sort of discount apps you get, but it's something, isn't it, right? They get, and then obviously you bring in the PD they get, and the fact they'll get, like, you know, we'll fully fund their masters or whatever it might be, right? But create like a unique package, like a package that's going to make them want to stay, make them join you, and makes you stand out. And that's not beyond like a local primary. Just to think about what they can offer, that some little sort of like perks that make it unique, worth working there. You're competing, aren't you, in a busy marketplace, and schools struggling, that, you know, they're struggling against places that may be like just more attractive financially or for other reasons to work. And so you've got to kind of like create as many opportunities as you can and look in sort of places you maybe wouldn't always look, and then really think about what makes coming to you and staying with you like special, and what can you offer. Now, don't break the bank, like don't give silly golden handshakes. No one's saying that, but you can make small differences with like just a few little things. I think that was that was really interesting to me, because I know that's something we do. I know that I've got a subscription to this Perk Box app, right? And it gives you like a free coffee, right, every week from Greg's or something. No, free Nero and a Greg sausage roll every week. People, like, everyone loves that stuff. Everyone loves a free sausage roll. I can't think that's a big deal to get that sorted out for the school. But yeah, there you go. Perk Box now. Like, but the little things, like, think that stuff through. You can't just give up, basically, can you? You can't just say, well, it's really hard here because and so we just can't recruit here. And I've been in a school that said that, and I believe that for a long time. And I've just watched people not have that problem, or appear not to, because they've just going back to that very first statement, they've just prioritized it and made it the number one priority, and thought about all the, over time they've learned this, of course, like it's not like they did all at once. Over time they've thought about, sort of thinking about every aspect of that process. So hopefully that kind of makes sense.
It does. And you set up your stall at the start saying you wanted something that could support people regardless of context, and I think that's what you've achieved, because there are things that are both actionable but also speak to general principles that are important for leaders, particularly inexperienced leaders who are at the very start of that journey and are going to then make those mistakes over the next number of years. So I think you're almost giving those teachers a head start. And I think we should revisit this in the summer, Matt, and sort of explore how your sort of career and your opinions have changed over time, and then things that we seek to avoid. And I think then that'll round off this conversation. Really.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll try and get some of the, I said it, obviously we talked about covering this one last week, and I was trying to get Jeremy and a few of the guys involved, because they're so wise, like I know this stuff pretty well. I'm involved in all the panels and stuff, so I live and breathe this with them, but the real wisdom's coming from them, and I just have to make this really clear that some of this is from me, but a large part of this interview and the knowledge I'm sharing has come from years of experience as really successful heads, and I think it's important to say that like these guys have secured outstanding time and time again for leadership. I mean, we've just had it at Burfield like a few weeks ago, like one of our schools, whatever framework you throw, they're getting it because their staff are super happy, right? And they're delivering decent, really good teaching and a really strong curriculum because the base are kind of covered as best they can be. And they speak to, people come and speak to ECTs and speak to experienced leaders and whoever else, and they're really happy with where they work. They're happy with where their career's going and stuff. And all these things aren't about money. All the things I've said aren't about money. MPQs don't cost anything these days, not huge amounts. They really don't. I know because I'm delivering them. They're almost being given away at the moment anyway. Lots of these things are not about money. They're about prioritizing. They're about spending time on the process. And if where I see people who are proven to be expert in that field, and really, it's a massive difference maker. We are in the hardest place ever to recruit, yet we have a massive pool of ECTs. We had 26 people for TDaPE today. A specialized TDaPE, 26 people that were all qualified for it. That comes from like just it's like Lamov quoting it, like sweating the small stuff. But all this wisdom, it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to Jeremy Meek and Dee Hughes and Zoe Griffiths and all the heads. I'm very fortunate to work with, Danny King and Mike Cotton. I think I'll name them really quickly. I feel like I'm doing an exception. I do need to name them because I spoke to them all. We've got Mike Cotton, Ed Gittins, another one. All these guys have been sort of brilliant in like sharing their expertise over time with me and chipping in. Before I did this, I made like 3 pages of notes in the book, so I didn't get anything wrong. I hope it's been useful. I hope it's been a decent, I've made a decent stab at being helpful.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I think it would be, awesome to talk to the people that you're, lucky enough to work with. So I think, let's make that happen during the summer. I think all I do is say, thank you very much for joining me, Matt.
That's right, man. It's good to see you again, dude. Yeah. Right. Cheers, everyone. I don't put this on YouTube. I'm the same colour as my background. So I've just been to went to my daughter's sports day. My daughter and son's sports. They have 2 children, but they did like 2 hours. 2 hours each, right? One was 9 till 11. The next one was 1 till 3. I've been in the sun all day, Kieran. I look like the same colour as my background. Do not put this on YouTube, dude.
I'll make it black and white. I'll take down the saturation for you. I promise, and I'll make sure you see it.
Sometimes with these sort of backgrounds, you sort of, if you move back a bit, you get lost behind them. I've looked at the whole interview, and I'm not actually got lost behind it. A bit freaked out by how I look in this. Anyway, thank you ever so much for your time. I hope anyone listening to this was useful. And if you're interested in mastery still, come and see us, because we're going to do some more open days and that. Actually, and the master results come out, they're really, really, really good. So really excited. We're quite proud of that stuff. They just came out the other day, didn't they? So we're super chuffed with how that's gone. Not because really good as in, like the data matters, but I guess the catch-up mattered to us. Like, would it work? And I think, that's an old podcast. I'm now talking about recruitment. Right, cheers.
Top 3 podcast, that one.
Yeah, well, it wasn't though, was it? It was fourth. It was fourth.
Oh, the next day it was in number 3.
Oh, can we start this podcast clip? Just put a clip on Matt's podcast top 3. Who did it knock out? Please say knock Neil out.
No, it was the reading fluency one went down into 4.
Oh, so I took one of Switchman's out.
I'll go and check which one it is.
Yeah, this is a great moment for me.
He's got enough in there.
Third place. Yeah, you have so many great guests. I'm super. Yeah, it's really on. It is an honor to be on it, and I know, we chat a lot, but it's good to come on and talk again, and hopefully it's been useful. Cheers, mate.
Always a pleasure. And to everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening.